Hello, how are you? Hope you're well. Okay, we've now come to the Eight of Spades, so the eighth chapter. It's all getting a bit confusing to me, so I'm thinking probably you. So to recap, the book is in the voice of Hans Thomas, who is 12 and travelling to Greece to find his mama. And we've heard about his past and his family's past, and he's found a sticky book that is written by Ludwig, who's the same name as his grandfather, who was a German that left his grandma. And Ludwig met Albert the baker, and when Albert was a boy, he went to visit Baker Hans, who's the same name as Hans Thomas. I'm sure it will all become clear. Okay, so we go back to the Sticky Bun book story written by Ludwig. Albert Clarge lifted his glass to his lips and took a mouthful of wine. When I looked at his old face, it was strange to imagine that this person was the neglected little boy who'd lost his mother on her sickbed. I tried to imagine the special friendship which had developed between him and Baker Hans. I had been lonely and forlorn when I had come to Dorf, but the man who had taken me in had once been just as exhausted. Oh, the man who'd taken him in was Albert. Albert put his glass back down on the table and raked about in the fire with a poker before he continued. Everyone in the village knew Baker Hans lived in a wooden cabin above Dorf. There were many rumours about what it was like there, but I don't think anyone had been inside his place. So it wasn't surprising that I had butterflies in my stomach as I walked between the high banks of snow up to Baker Hans that winter evening. I was the very first person to visit the mysterious baker. A white full moon rose above the mountains in the east, and the first stars had already appeared in the night sky. As I walked up that last little hill, I remembered what Baker Hans had said about me one day, tasting a fizzy drink 1,000 times better. I'm going to have to read that again. As I walked up the last little hill, I remembered what Baker Hans had said about me one day, tasting a fizzy drink 1,000 times better than the one I'd had after the big fight. Did this drink have anything to do with the big secret? Oh, the big fight with the bullies. Right, okay. I soon spied the house up on the ridge, and as I'm sure you understand, Ludwig, that house was the very house we're sitting in now. I nodded quickly, and the old baker continued. I passed the water pump, hurried over the snow-covered courtyard, and knocked on the door. I heard Baker Hans call, "Come in, my son." Now you have to remember, I was only 12 years old at the time, and I still lived at home on the farm with my father. So it felt a bit strange to be addressed as another man's son. I stepped inside, and it was like slipping into another world. Baker Hans sat in a deep rocking chair, and all over the room there were glass bowls with goldfish inside. In every corner a little piece of rainbow danced. But there was not only goldfish here. I stood for a long time staring at objects I had never seen before. It took many years before I could put into words what I saw there. There were ships in bottles and conch shells, Buddha figures and precious stones, boomerangs and wooden dolls, old rapiers. Swords? Not sure. Oh, and swords, knives and pistols. Persian cushions and South American carpets made of llama wool. I particularly noticed a strange glass figure of an animal with a little pointed head and 6 legs. It was like a whirlwind from foreign lands. I might have heard of some of the things I saw, but this was long before I had seen a photograph. The whole atmosphere in the little cabin was totally different from the way I had imagined it to be. It was as though I were no longer at Baker Hans. Suddenly I was visiting an old seafarer. Oil lamps were lit around the room, and these were so different from the paraffin lamps I was used to seeing. They must have come from his life at sea. The old man asked me to sit down in a chair beside the fire, and it was exactly the same chair you're sitting in now, Ludwig. Do you understand? I nodded again. Before I sat down, I walked around the cosy room looking at all the goldfish. Some of them were red, yellow, and orange. Others were green, blue, and violet. I had seen a goldfish like these only once before, and that had been on a little table in the back room of Baker Hans's bakery. That had been on a little table in the back room of Baker Hans's bakery. Read that again. I had often stood staring at the tiny fish swimming back and forth inside the glass bowl while Baker Hans made dough. "What a lot of goldfish you have," I exclaimed as I walked across the room towards him. "Are you going to tell me where you caught them?" He chuckled and said, "All in due course, my boy, all in due course. Tell me, would you like to be the baker in Dorf one day when I am gone?" Although I was only a child, the idea had already occurred to me. I didn't have anything in my life except Baker Hans and his bakery. Mother was dead. Father had stopped asking about my comings and goings, and all my brothers and sisters had moved away from Dorf. "I've already decided to stay in the bakery trade," I replied formally. "I thought as much," said the old man. "You will have to look after my fish as well, and there's even more. You'll be the keeper of the secret of the rainbow fizz." "Rainbow fizz?" "Yes, that and everything else, my boy." "Tell me about the rainbow fizz," I asked. He raised his white eyebrows and whispered, "It has to be tasted, my boy." "Can't you tell me what it tastes like?" He shook his head in despair. "A normal fizzy drink tastes of orange or pear or raspberry, and that's that. That isn't the case with rainbow fizz, Abbott. You taste all those flavours at the same time with this drink, and you even taste fruits and berries you've never been near with your tongue." "Then it must be good," I said. "Ha! It's more than just good. You can taste a normal fizzy drink only in your mouth, first on your tongue, then the roof of your mouth, and then a little bit down your throat. You can taste rainbow fizz in your nose and head, down through your legs and out through your arms." "Think you're pulling my leg," I said. "You think so?" The old man almost looked dumbfounded, so I had decided to ask something that was easier to answer. "What colour is it?" I asked. Baker Hans started to laugh. "Oh, you're full of questions, aren't you, boy? And that's good, but it's not always easy to answer. I have to show you the drink, you see." Baker Hans got up and walked over to a door which led into a little bedroom. Inside there was a glass bowl with a goldfish in it. The old man pulled out a ladder from underneath the bed and leaned it up against the wall. I noticed a little trapdoor in the ceiling, which was locked with a heavy padlock. The baker climbed the ladder and opened the trapdoor to the attic with a key, which he fished out of his shirt pocket. "Come here, my boy," he said. "No one but me has been here for more than 50 years. I followed him up into the attic. Moonlight streamed in through a little window in the roof. It fell upon old chests and ship's bells lying under a cover of dust and spider webs. But it wasn't only the moon lighting up the dark attic. The moonlight was blue, but there was also a bright shimmer in all the colours of the rainbow. Baker Hans made his way across the attic floor. He stopped at the far end and pointed towards a corner. An old bottle was standing on the floor under the slanting roof. A light shone from the bottle, which was so dazzlingly beautiful that at first I had to cover my eyes. It was a clear glass bottle, but the contents were red, yellow, green and violet, all those colours at once. Baker Hans picked up the bottle, and the contents glittered like liquid diamonds. "What is it?" I whispered timidly. The old baker's face was serious. "This, my boy, is rainbow fizz. These are the last drops to be found in the whole world." "And what's that?" I asked, pointing down at a small wooden box containing a pile of dusty old playing cards. They had almost disintegrated. "The 8 of spades" lay on the top of the heap. I could only just make out a number 8 in the left-hand corner of the card. Baker Hans put his finger to his lips and whispered, "They're Frode's playing cards, Albert." "Frode?" "Yes, Frode. But we'll hear that story another evening. Now you and I are going to take this bottle down to the living room." With the bottle in his hand, the old man started to walk across the floor. He looked like a pixie with a lantern. The only difference was that this lantern didn't know whether it wanted to shine red, green, yellow or blue. Small specks of colour splashed across the room, like the light from 100 tiny dancing lanterns. When we were back downstairs in the living room, he put the bottle on the table in front of the fireplace. The exotic objects in the room were coloured by the contents of the bottle. The Buddha figure became green, an old revolver became blue, and a boomerang became red like blood. "Is that rainbow fizz?" I asked again. "Yes, the last drops. And it's just as well, Albert, because this is a drink which is so terribly good. I wouldn't like to say what might happen if it were sold over the counter." He got up and fetched a little glass. Then he poured a couple of drops into it. They lay on the bottom of the glass and glittered like snow crystals. "That's enough," he said. "Don't I get any more?" I asked, surprised. The old man shook his head. "A little taste is more than enough. The taste of one drop of rainbow fizz will last for many hours." "So maybe I can drink a drop now and another drop early tomorrow morning?" I suggested. Baker Hans shook his head in despair. No. 1 drop now and no more drops ever again. You will find this drop so good you will want to steal the rest. That's why I have to lock it up in the attic again as soon as you leave. When I've told you about Frode's playing cards, you'll think yourself lucky I didn't give you the whole bottle." "Have you tasted it yourself?" "Yes, once. But that was more than 50 years ago." Baker Hans got up from his chair by the fire, took the bottle with the liquid diamonds and put it in the little bedroom. When he returned, he placed one hand on my shoulder and said, "Drink now. This is the greatest moment of your life, my boy. You will always remember it, but this moment will never, ever return." I raised the little glass to my mouth and drank the glittering drops that lay in the bottom. As soon as the first drop tickled the tip of my tongue, a wave of desire washed through my body. At first I tasted all the best flavours I had tasted previously in my young life, and then 1,000 other flavours surged through my body. Baker Hans had been right about the taste starting from the tip of my tongue, but I could also taste strawberry, raspberry, apple and banana in my arms and my legs. In the tip of my little finger I could taste honey. In one of my toes I tasted preserved pears, and in the small of my back confectioner's custard. I could smell the scent of my mother all over my body. It was a smell I had forgotten, although I had missed it ever since she died. When the first storm of flavour eased, it was as though the whole world was in my body. Yes, as if I was the whole world. I suddenly felt that all the woods and lakes, mountains and fields were part of my body. Although my mother was dead, it was as though she were out there, somewhere. When I looked at the green Buddha figure, it seemed to laugh. I glanced at the two swords hanging crossed on the wall, and now they appeared to fence. The ship in the bottle, which I'd spotted as soon as I had entered Hans' cabin, was on top of a large cupboard. I now felt as though I was standing on board the old sailing ship, rushing towards a lush island in the distance. "Was it good?" I heard a voice say. It was Baker Hans. He leaned over and ruffled my hair. Was all I could reply. I didn't know what to say. And so it is today. I can't say what Rainbow's Fizz tasted like. It tasted like everything. I just know I still get tears in my eyes when I think of how good it is. Interesting. And I'm so pleased they've mentioned the pack of cards. Rowan's pack of cards. Yeah, I think we've got time. 9 of spades. Dad had kept trying to talk to me while I read about Rainbow Fizz. We're Hans Thomas now. But that drink was so good, I couldn't put the sticky bun book down. Now and then, to be polite, I glanced out of the window when Dad commented on the view. "Wow," I'd say, or "beautiful." One of the things Dad pointed out while I continued to sneak around Baker Hans's attic was that all the signs and names were written in Italian. We were driving through the Italian part of Switzerland, and the names were not the only things that were different. Even while I was reading about Rainbow Fizz, I had noticed the valley we drove through had flowers and trees, which really belonged to countries from the Mediterranean regions. Dad, who'd been all over the world, started to comment on the vegetation. "Mimosa," he said, "magnolia, rhododendron, azalea, Japanese cherry tree." We saw a number of palm trees too, long before we'd crossed the Italian border. "We're not far from Lugano," Dad said as I put the book down. I suggested we spend the night there, but Dad shook his head. The agreement was we would cross the Italian border first. It's not that far now, and it's still early afternoon. As a consolation, we had a long stop in Lugano. First of all, we nosed around the streets and in the various gardens and parks the town was so full of. I took the magnifying glass with me and made a few botanical investigations, while Dad bought an English newspaper and smoked a cigarette. I found 2 very distinct trees. One had large red flowers, while the other had rather small yellow ones. The flowers had totally different forms as well. Nevertheless, these 2 trees must have been of the same family, because when I studied the leaves from the 2 trees closely under the magnifying glass, I discovered the veins and fibres of the leaves were almost identical. We suddenly heard a nightingale. It chirped, whistled, twittered, and peeped for so long and so beautifully I almost started to cry. Dad was equally impressed, but only laughed. It was so hot that I got 2 ice creams without having to coax Dad into philosophizing. I tried to get a big cockroach to walk along the ice cream stick so I could put it under the magnifying glass, but this particular cockroach had a hopeless fear of the doctor. They jump out as soon as the thermometer teeters over 30 degrees, Dad said. And they jump away again as soon as they see an ice cream stick, I replied. Before getting back in the car, Dad bought a pack of cards. He did this as often as other people might buy a magazine. He wasn't particularly interested in playing cards, and he didn't play solitaire either. I was the only one who did that. So I'd better explain about these packs of cards. Dad worked as a mechanic in a large garage in Arundel. Apart from going back and forth to work, he'd always been utterly absorbed by the external questions. The bookshelves in his room were overflowing with books about different philosophical subjects. But he also had a pretty normal hobby. Well, exactly how normal it is of course open to discussion. Lots of people collect different things like stones, coins, stamps and butterflies. Dad also had a passion for collecting. He collected jokers. This was something he'd done long before I'd known him. I think he began when he was at sea. He had a drawer full of different jokers. He mainly went about it by asking for the joker from people playing cards. He would walk over to complete strangers sitting at a cafe or by the dockside, playing cards, and say that he was a passionate collector of jokers, and could he have the joker if they didn't need it in the game. Most of them plucked out the joker and gave it to him right away, but a lot of them looked at him as though they were about to say, "Takes all kinds." Some politely said no to the request. Others refused in a bolder fashion. I sometimes felt like a gypsy child who'd been involuntarily drawn into some kind of begging operation. Of course, I wondered how this unique hobby had begun. In this way, Dad had managed to collect a card from all the packs of cards he'd come across. Therefore, his hobby seemed related to collecting a postcard from all the corners of the world. It was also clear that the joker was the only card he could collect. For example, he couldn't collect the 9 of spades or the king of clubs because interrupting a high-spirited bridge party and asking for the king of clubs or the 9 of spades just wasn't done. The whole point was that there are usually 2 jokers in a pack of cards. We had found up to 3 and 4, but generally there were 2. Moreover, there aren't many games requiring the joker, and on the rare occasions it is used, you can get by with just 1. But Dad was interested in jokers for a deeper reason. The fact was, Dad considered himself a joker. He rarely said it straight out, but I'd known for a long time that he saw himself as a joker in a pack of cards. A joker is a little fool who is different from everyone else. He's not a club, diamond, heart or spade. He's not an 8 or a 9, a king or a jack. He's an outsider. He is placed in the same pack as the other cards, but he doesn't belong there. Therefore, he can be removed without anybody missing him. That's sad. I think Dad felt like a joker when he grew up as the illegitimate child of a German soldier in Arundel. But there was even more. Dad was also a joker in being a philosopher. He always felt he saw peculiar things that everyone else was blind to. So when Dad bought this pack of cards in Lugano, it wasn't for the pack itself. Something made him particularly curious to see what the joker of this pack of cards looked like. He was so excited, he opened the package right away and pulled out one of the jokers. "Just as I thought," he said. "I've never seen this one before." He put the joker in his shirt pocket. Now it's my turn. "Do I get the pack of cards?" Dad handed the rest of the pack to me. This was an unwritten law. When Dad bought a pack of cards, he kept the joker, never more than one, and gave the rest of the cards to me if I asked for them before he disposed of them elsewhere. In this way, I'd collected nearly 100 packs of cards. Because I was an only child and didn't have a mother at home, I really liked playing solitaire, but I wasn't an avid collector, so I began to feel I had enough packs of cards. Sometimes Dad would simply buy a pack of cards, snatch the joker and throw the rest away. It was almost like peeling a banana or throwing away the skin. Garbage, he might say, as he took the good from the bad and tossed the remains in the bin. He generally got rid of the garbage, however, in a more compassionate way. If I didn't want the cards, he'd find some other children and give the pack of cards to them without saying a word. In this way, he paid mankind back for all the jokers he had gone around bumming off casual card players. I thought mankind got a good deal. When we started the car again, Dad confided in me that the scenery was so beautiful here, he wanted to make a little detour. Instead of following the highway from Lugano to Como, we drove along Lake Lugano. We crossed the Italian border after having driven halfway along the lake. I soon understood why Dad had chosen this route. Just after we'd left Lake Lugano, he came to a much larger lake with a lot of boat traffic. It was Lake Como. From here, we drove through a little town called Menaggio. Oiganem, I said. Oh, because he says words backwards. Sorry, I'd forgotten that. So Oiganem, Menaggio backwards. We drove along the large lake for several miles before we arrived in Como later that evening. While we drove, Dad continued to name all the trees we saw. Stone pine, he said. Cypress, olive, fig. I didn't know where he got all the names from. I had heard a couple of them before, but all the others he could have just made up for all I knew. In between all the impressions from the landscape around us, I read more from the Sticky Bum book. I was eager to find out where Baker Hands had got the delicious rainbow fish, and all the goldfish for that matter. Before I started to read, I made sure to start a game of solitaire, so I had a kind of explanation as to why I was so quiet. I had promised the nice baker in Dorf to keep the Sticky Bun book a secret between the two of us. Okay, getting a bit more interesting. And I'm glad there's been a link as well, apart from all the names being similar, of the cards, the playing cards. There's Frode's playing cards in Ludwig's story, and there's playing cards in Hans Thomas' story. So I think it's getting a bit more exciting now, isn't it? What do you think? Next one is Ten of Spades, but I'm going to have to leave it there because the time's coming up and I'll be cut off. Love you loads. See you soon. Mwah.